Yeah. Hey guys, all right, just before the show starts, I wanted to let you guys know that my fight against cancel culture is still happening. Please go to the description below. There's a link titled Support My Fight Against Cancel Culture. If you want to help my fight, please consider giving a bit of a donation. All the information's in that link. With that being said, enjoy the show.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Sit Down in Lockdown, where I'm hosting for a change, and I will be asking the questions. Nice to be in charge again. Uh,
Again.
Again, well, I just did I just got off a stream on my own little channel, interviewing Nicholas Woodsmith, about fiction, libertarianism, all kinds of shenanigans. And today I'll be interviewing you about your shenanigans.
Yes.
So, Joe, well, your latest shenanigans, which we mentioned briefly before we came on the air, were the videos that you've been producing for the latest sort of crisis and tension between the races in South Africa, which is the issue of farm murders, particularly this rather spectacular series of incidents that have been happening around Senegal. And I mean, you've produced some very hard hitting bits of video, drawing attention to, the really harsh polarities around how people are talking about this issue. And what drove you to put so much effort into it? What drew you to this issue? Because you're not a South African, at least not a native South African. What made you fall so passionately for the plight of the Afrikaners?
Well, first off, thank you, Rob, for being willing to host the show and interview me. It's different for me because usually I'm the one that's controlling the show. So this is very interesting. And great question, by the way. And just for the record, I did not instruct Rob to ask me that question. As I told you before we went on air, in recent years, I've become more invested and interested in current affairs in South Africa, whether it be politics, ideologies, and so on and so forth. And after marrying a lovely woman who is also English but also Afrikaans, she has Afrikaans family, I was introduced to the Afrikaans culture and Afrikaners who welcomed me with open arms, and I got to know a bit about them, and I got to hear stories, and then I started to take a bit of an interest in what's going on and looking behind the scenes. And before when I came to South Africa, and you alluded to it now, I wasn't born in South Africa, but I've been in Africa for 13 plus 8, so that's 20. I'm at 21. I've been in Africa for about 21 years of my life, and because I was in Egypt before I came to South Africa. And I do and have fallen in love with South Africa. I have the South African citizenship passport. So I have dual citizenship, American and South African. I started my comedy career here, and I do have a big love for South Africa. So when I see what is happening in this country, a country that I thought was, and okay, I still think it's a very beautiful country, don't get me wrong, but I didn't realize that there was so much hate being driven by the powers that be. And the mainstream media is kind of an extension of that. They seem to create this polarization as well. There are some other political parties that we know of that also drive this polarization, especially when it comes to racism. And it became like a thing. I was heartbroken, absolutely heartbroken by the death of Brendan Horner, 21-year-old that was killed in the most horrific way. Stabbed multiple times and hung to a pole. It's like making a statement. And he's a 21-year-old dude. And I think I recently I think why it hit me so hard is also because I'm newly married. We got married um, before the lockdown happened, like made it just in time, and I became part of this new family. I during lockdown, I remember realizing like, oh my word, I'm an uncle now because I have two sisters-in-law. One of them has twins, and I realized like, oh my word, I'm an uncle now to these boys, and the same sister-in-law fell pregnant again and had a lovely baby girl. And when she was born, this side of me was like, if anyone hurts this child, I'm gonna hurt them back. And being part of this family, hearing a story like Brendan Horner, I just think to myself like, shit, that could have been my nephew. That could have been a family member of mine. And it breaks my heart that the violence is so extreme, which is why I made these videos to try and give a different flavor and a different perspective of what's going on in South Africa.
Yeah, no, I mean, I remember my own political awakening having a certain flavor, a similar flavor to yours. I grew up in the new South Africa. I grew up with a naive sort of belief in the principles and the promises of the Rainbow Nation.
Yeah.
And when it struck me that many of my fellow countrymen wanted me dead, and that nobody significant really saw a problem with this, that really shook me to the core. And I was just wondering, to what extent, when you first arrived in South Africa, what was your impression of the country? How did your imagination shape your perceptions? The sort of foreign image that South Africa likes to project of itself.
Mm. I was quite naive as well. I had visited South Africa before I moved here in 2007. I think in 2006, I visited South Africa for a very brief, I think it was 2 weeks. And I went everywhere. I went on top of Table Mountain. I went to Cape of Good Hope. I went to Hout Bay, traveled basically a lot of Cape Town. And I fell in love with the place. It was this beautiful country. I was skateboarding at the time, and I went to the skate park in Boogaloo's, which has since closed down. And I was very excited about that because in Egypt we didn't have skate parks. So going to my first ever skate park was very exciting for me. So I fell in love with this country because I saw that it was very almost like first world to a certain degree. It was definitely more advanced than Egypt. So for me, it was like, wow, this is like it's not completely first world. So it's almost like America, but it's got a bit of the Egyptian third world mix. It's a developing country, but it's so nice. People are so welcoming, nice. They don't care that I'm American. And in Egypt, that was kind of a problem. So I really, my first 2 weeks here, I fell in love with this country, and then my parents decided to unfortunately get a divorce, and my mom, she's South African, well, she's partially South African as well. So she wanted to move back here, and I decided to move with her. And yeah, for the first years of me living here, I didn't pay much attention to politics. I thought this was a very amazing country. I got along with everyone, whether they were black, white, colored. I just lived and enjoyed, going to all these awesome places in Cape Town, traveling South Africa as well. Started my comedy career here. Yeah, I was very, very naive to what on the surface looked like a rainbow nation.
Yes, it's that promise where you because a lot of people are very, very friendly. I still remember this quote by Watkin Tudor Jones, the guy behind Die Antwoord. There's an old interview with him on the top of Table Mountain where they asked him if he could sum up South Africa for a foreigner, and he'd say it's just very beautiful and very ugly and very friendly. And I think that really does sort of sum it up, as there's a lot of beauty and a lot of extreme ugliness, but almost everyone you meet is very personable, very friendly, and unlike in most of Europe, it's extremely easy to just strike up a conversation with a random stranger in almost any circumstance. And I think that often leads people to believe that, there's not so much tension under the surface.
Yeah, exactly. I think, look, it's great that people are friendly. I think that's a characteristic of South Africans that is lacking in other parts of the world, even in America. In America, I know from my family, like they don't speak to their neighbors, like they don't. But as whereas here, like there's a braai almost every Saturday. Someone's doing a braai, you can smell it, and you can go up to that person. And I'm not saying that you can impose on their braai or anything like that, but there are some people that do, and but you can strike up a conversation very easily, like, "Hey, man, Mike China, how are you?" "Oh wow, look at the weather," whatever case it might be. Yeah, it's 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 definitely a friendly place. Can be.
Yeah. And I think one of the other things that sort of probably appeals to you a lot is that we tend to have look, we used to have a reputation back in the day for not having any sense of humor. And it's it seems like we've had to develop one to cope with the absurdities of the new South Africa, and kind of a good place for a comedian to come to start up. And I was wondering, sort of, did you get into comedy when you were in South Africa, or were you already interested in it and trying it out before you came here?
Okay, so yes and no. So what I mean by that is I was interested in stand-up comedy before I came to South Africa. I had stumbled on stand-up comedy from a friend of mine in Egypt who introduced me to Dave Chappelle, not personally, but he was listening to Dave Chappelle soundbite. And I just heard this man saying a few words and then the audience laughing. And I was like, what is this? That was actually kind of funny. What is that? And then my friend explained to me, he's like, oh, this is Dave Chappelle. He's a stand-up comedian. And I was like, what's a stand-up comedian? He's like, oh, it's a guy who basically goes on stage and tells jokes for a living. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And then I was like, do you have any more of this? Is there more that I can listen to? And at this time, the internet was still fairly new, but it was at a time when people were downloading like a crap load. So I was able to get a hold of all of Dave Chappelle's one-man shows. I was able to get a hold of all the other guys like from the 80s and the 90s, like Jim Carrey, Eddie Murphy, Drew Carey, Alan, what's his name? Tim Allen, what's his name? Adam Sandler, Seinfeld, Richard Pryor, Bill Cosby. I know some of those names will strike fear in people. Robin Williams, especially. Dane Cook, who's a bit newer at that time. So yeah, the list can go on and on. I just started venturing into stand-up comedy when I was about 11, 12. And I was shocked to even know that some of the comedians I learned or I found out about were actually huge movie stars, like Chris Rock and Eddie Murphy, and at the time, and then there was Doctor Dolittle, there was Flubber, there was this, there was that, and all these movies that I had watched, and I was like, oh my word, these guys are stand-up comedians, like this is so cool. And I just listened to them. I fell in love with Seinfeld. I fell in love with Frasier. I fell in love with Third Rock from the Sun. I fell in love with all these 90s, 80s sitcoms in the early 2000s. And eventually, the one comedian that I fell like I was just a huge fan of was Dane Cook. Now I know not a lot of
Mm.
people like Dane Cook, but for some reason, Dane Cook I could relate to. Dane Cook for me was like, I'm not saying he was better than any of the names I mentioned earlier. I'm not saying that, but for some reason, his style, his voice, it resonated with me. And I would watch Dane if I had a bad day at school. I would watch Dane if a girl rejected me. I would watch Dane if I was sick. It's like seriously, I knew nearly every single one man show that he did. I knew it so well that by the time I came to South Africa, how I actually started doing stand up comedy was actually I was at a braai one of my friends' brides, Nathan. And I get, and you must understand also that in Egypt we couldn't really drink. So I did kind of go a bit crazy when I got here. And and one evening, I'm at a braai with my friend Nathan, and I can't remember how it started, but I do know that I was intoxicated enough that I had confidence to basically reenact almost all of Dane Cook's one man show. And I did state at the party that this is Dane Cook. It's not my jokes. This is Dane Cook. And because I think people were talking about jokes and stuff like that, and then I started to say jokes of his, and then I started to act it out, and that's when Nathan told me like, hey, maybe you should try stand up comedy, and I was like, nah, this is Dane Cook stuff. I can't do stand up. Anyway, fast forward a few months. I think maybe a year or two later, or a year later, I start organizing my own stand-up comedy braais. I call them comedy braais, where I'd have a braai at my place, invite some friends, and write my own stuff and try the material. Crap. It was very crappy. But yeah, that I started also studying drama. I studied IT and I studied graphic design. Then I studied theater. And when I was studying theater, that's when I started to embrace stand-up comedy a lot because theater helped me gain that confidence. Also, how to produce a theater show. And yeah, that definitely gave me a lot of confidence when it came to stand-up comedy. And before I knew it, I was moving on from comedy braais to live performances. And that's pretty much in 2010, I had my first live show in front of people I didn't know in July of 2010. So yeah, just hit 10 years.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah. And then the rest is what they call history, man.
Yeah. So you've been based in Cape Town a lot now. I remember. I remember. So I was a typical sort of UCT student, and I hung out a lot in Observatory, and so the big place there. You'll know the Armchair quite well.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, and I've been to a few of the gigs, and you start to recognize faces and names. And obviously, I'm not very good at getting them off the top of my head. But I mean, the other place that I would go to a lot, where you'd see stand up, would be the Waiting Room. Not the Waiting Room, the Mercury. Sorry,
the Mercury. Yes.
The Mercury had a lot of good comedy shows, and what I found is that South African comedians seem to have absolutely no qualms about performing to an empty room.
Well, that kind of comes with the territory. Yeah, but that's the circuit. That's the underground circuit. Like you're not gonna have full rooms on. I mean, because most of these shows happen on like a weeknight, which is a school night. And yeah, like we're used to like it's actually funny because when the lockdown happened in South Africa and we were told when they started to ease the lockdown a bit and they started to say like, oh, only 50% or 10% or something like that, or only like a certain amount of people, like a very small amount of people could be in a restaurant, we were like, well, that's no different to a normal night on the show where we have 3 people, so it's fine. So yeah.
No, I mean, so do you find that so you've spent a lot more time in Cape Town. Have you toured other cities and done comedy elsewhere in South Africa?
Okay, I had a very brief experience with Joburg, and I learned a lot doing, I did the box in Joburg. I don't think it's open anymore.
Oh, okay.
And I did Soweto Theatre for comics, sorry, how can I forget the name now? SA Comics Choice Awards. I was part of the newcomers category in 2014, and I performed at the Soweto Theatre, which was amazing. That was a great experience. I was told that my jokes were too Cape Townian, but at Soweto Theatre, I heard a lot of laughter. I don't know. Like I didn't know. I didn't know. It was my first time in Joburg. I didn't know that there's such a thing as like, no, your jokes are too Cape Townian. Because when I went to the box, I died. But I had done the same set I did in Soweto Theatre. I did at the box, and in Soweto Theatre it worked. Everybody laughed. Everybody had a great time. But when I went to the box, it was weird. And then what the organizer came to me and said, like, yeah, your jokes are a bit too Cape Townian because we don't know away and we don't know other Cape Townian slang. And I was like, oh, well, you know. And he was like, it's cool, like, you'll learn. But yeah, that was a weird experience. But I haven't been to Durban. I want to go to Durban and do a bit of the circuit there. Mainly done Cape Town. That's mainly where my comedy's been.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know if I don't know what you make of the different sort of cultures in the big metropoles. I mean, Joburg is much more unforgiving of people in general. They're very much more fast paced. You get it right the first time, or we're not interested in you. It's very much, and I feel that the comedy is much more suited to people who have a much more rough and ready, high energy delivery.
Mm.
I mean, this is an interesting thing that Cape Town is much more laid back. They're much more for gentle conversation, and you can make much more sort of esoteric observations about life before people sort of, what is this guy talking about? And I think it's got something to do with the availability of the wacky tobacco down that side.
I don't know. I think. Look, I think the audiences differ obviously because of cultural aspects of it, and ethnic groups. It's weird, man. Like I can do a show here in Cape Town, in Stellenbosch or northern suburbs, take the same set, and go to Cape Town CBD, and it will like in northern suburbs it kills. Cape Town CBD, it dies. It's I think audiences in general, especially in Cape Town or in South Africa for that matter, because of the diversity that there is in this country, it's a hit and miss almost. Look, there is a point where you do realize, and you do like in your comedy career, you start to figure out, okay, cool. You start to be able to read the audience very well. Like before the lockdown, I'm going to blow my own horn here. I was very good as a host. Like I was starting to get into that rhythm where I could speak to the audience and come up with a joke on the fly. And it takes years to get to that level. There was a very long time in my comedy career where I avoided talking to the audience because I wasn't good at the whole rifting and stuff like that. But towards the months leading up to lockdown, I was getting really into the groove of hosting, and I used to love hosting because I almost didn't care. Like I just said what I wanted to say. I mean, there was a guy once in the audience who I swear looked like Jesus, and I just said, "Jesus is in the audience, ladies and gentlemen," and it killed. It just killed because everybody looked at him and was just burst out laughing, and because he looked like freaking Jesus. And then I just riffed off that, and then I used to riff off the audience when I couldn't pronounce their names. I'd make fun of myself. A lot of my comedy is making fun of myself as an American experiencing South African culture. And I think that works very well because I tend to put a twist on things which will make South Africans, think next time they're a robot, or next time they say away, or next time they say, are you just? At least I hope that's what happens. So yeah, I think I've tried to make my comedy as general as possible so that every South African can relate to it in some way. But now the challenge is, and this is where the whole Cape Townian thing came in, because I do a lot of jokes with away and are you just, which is apparently a very Cape Townian thing. I didn't know that Joburg aren't very familiar with away. So that was the mistake I made. But I talk about other things. I talk about experiencing a braai. I talk about experiencing Books, the bookshop for the international viewers that are listening to this. I experienced... yeah.
I still can't there's no way that they don't know what their name means these days. There's no way.
Do you happen to know? Because you're a very very intelligent man. Do you know what it stands for? Because I have asked so many people, what does it stand for? Nobody can answer me.
Christian Union Ministries.
Really?
I'm like 90% certain.
Oh man. Okay, well that answers that
Well, I mean,
question.
look, even a Christian union involves a little cum.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
talk about seeing that, and I talk about I actually have like that cum books actually goes a bit dark because I talk about Hitler in that joke. So let that wreck your brain a bit. How do I go from cum books to Hitler? Yeah.
Well, I suppose coming on books is better than burning them.
Oh man. But yeah, there's all these little
Sure.
things that I that I play on. Um,
Speaking of cum, I mean, I was thinking of because one of the things that I use at the moment to distract me when I'm trying to procrastinate is listening to the comedy podcast Cumtown, which is extremely lowbrow. It's just about the most lowbrow, dumb humor you can possibly get. And so for me, when I need to switch my brain off, I'll sit and listen to three stoned New Yorkers
okay, that
talking
explains a
about.
lot.
No, well, look, if I think that one thing that I find is, so stand up is a very American art form, and it's very very much it's a hugely sort of popular, big theater, big stadiums. It's that very delicate thing that is trying to appeal to the lowest common denominator without talking down to them, which is an extraordinarily difficult balance. Whereas comedy in the rest of the world, and like South Africa has its own traditional comedy, like comedy traditions that have sort of fallen by the wayside. But if you're Afrikaans, you'll recognize the cabaret style survives in the colored communities,
Mm.
and the sort of Ronnie Kampvuur geselskap thing survives in the Afrikaans community. Everyone remembers Tola van der Merwe and those programs where they sit in like a semicircle in a restaurant, and no one has any idea who these people are. They're just there because Oom Frick knows how to tell a good story, and he rocks up and he tells a couple of jokes for them. And I think it's very interesting. Do you think that having that sort of deeper cultural understanding of the art form, being an American art form, do you think that's helped you deal with the crowd? Because I know you're a big fan of Dane Cook, and Dane Cook in particular, he was a very much a people person, and after the shows, he was very much focused on building that connection with the crowd.
Mm.
So
Mm.
finding that lowest common denominator, but treating them as human beings, not a target market, that sort of difficult balance there. How do you find that in South Africa, where we're so diverse?
It's difficult. A lot of the times, I'm asking my friends or my wife, like, okay, so what's the colored culture like in this scenario? How do white people feel about this? How do Afrikaners feel about this? How do blacks feel about this? I'm even at the point where sometimes I have to make sure that my jokes are not offensive to people, because you don't want to be offensive to a group. They always say punch up, not down. And in South Africa, because of the diversity, it's a difficult balance to find, and especially when I first started doing this type of comedy, where I was talking about certain aspects of the South African culture. My one friend Nathan, again, he gave me some good advice. He said, "There's a problem with one of the jokes I've been saying, because it's super funny, but the setup is incorrect." So, for example, I would say, like, I have this joke where I would start by saying, I basically would start by saying, yeah, so robots, what's up with that, blah 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 blah, and I'd go into my robot shtick, right? But he said all you need to do is say that you love South Africa, but. because he said that it sounds like I'm actually making fun of South Africans, like I'm punching down.
Mm.
And that's not what I want. I don't want people to think that I'm making fun of South Africans. Like, haha, you guys are ridiculous. You guys think like this. You guys think like that. That's a crazy thought, you know? I want people to be able to watch my comedy and realize, like, this was something that I experienced and I thought it was funny because I'm the idiot experiencing this. I'm the one who thought, when you guys said robots, I thought RoboCop was directing traffic. Like that's not a normal thing for me. So that kind of stuff, and it is difficult. I'm still venturing into other cultures of South Africa. I'm still trying to learn more about the black culture. And even the black culture has so many different tribes. There's the Swane, there's the Zulu, there's all these other tribes I'm trying to learn about. Trying to learn about the colored culture as well, which have their own. There's a Christian colored, Muslim colored, who apparently are all different in some degree, and learning about the Afrikaans and the whites. And I think, I try and touch on as much as I can throughout my comedy, because at the end of the day, like I think with my comedy and about South Africa, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to make South Africans feel better about their culture, and how unique it is, and it's something that they should be proud of, because there is a lot of people that aren't proud of South Africa, and for me, it's like you have a beautiful country, you have beautiful people, and it's these little quirks, these little cultural differences that make you so special and unique. Where in the world do they call traffic lights robots? I haven't seen anywhere else except for Namibia, maybe, but that's just an extension. And like, where in the world are
Yeah, just a colony of South Africa that doesn't know what it's doing.
exactly? Where in the world are you going to see come books? Where in the world are you going to experience a real braai, like an actual braai with wood and meat and blitz and the right blitz?
Blitz, oh, that stuff.
I've seen people take that shit very seriously, man. Like, if there's no blitz in the house, they turn into like
Oh,
Silence of the Lambs, like Yanni, Yanni, boss the blitz. It's like it gets really intense. And I've seen people lose their shit, but I've also seen people who become like mad scientists. With the blitz, they start making their own blitz with
oh
like
yes.
the Rooibos tea bag, and then they put honey and benzene and their secret ingredient Brunavine. Burns for days,
Oh,
bro. And that's all unique. That's all amazing, unique cultural aspects of South Africa. And
we've
that's
got
all the stuff I talk about.
yeah, we've got to be the only country which has a cooking show where people bake cakes in braais. Like it doesn't. Have you not seen that one?
No, I
I can't
haven't.
remember what it's called, but they have it's like a contest where you have all of these people doing like extravagant cooking with a braai. And I remember like, but I remember so, coming from a country where it's like this is a thing every male prides themselves on. I come out here to the Netherlands, and I'm at like they decide to do like a kind of bring in bride type thing, and they've got this really broken Weber that doesn't like the thing that allows you to shift the holes at the bottom is like stuffed up so you can't open the bottom, so there's like no through air or anything, and I can't get the bloody thing lit. And so this tall German guy comes up to me and typical German fashion says, well, briquettes are not very easy to light. Maybe you should use some firelighter. And I nearly because no one can talk down to you like a German.
But speaking about that, right? So that's something else I admire about the South African culture. The whole, boer makaplan. Like the willingness of South Africans, and yes, that's an Afrikaans saying, but I think it translates through the entire South Africa because whether you're black, Indian, colored, white, Afrikaans, you're gonna find a way to flip and solve whatever it is that's the problem. You're gonna find a way,
Yeah,
and
you
people come
dollar
up
what you
with
must.
innovative things, to dollar what you must, to come up with solutions to a problem. And I think that is also something else that is very, very unique to to South Africa as well. I think, and that's again with my comedy. That's what I try and bring to light. I don't talk about politics in my comedy, and I never will. The political sphere and ideologies will remain on YouTube. I think when I go on the stage, when people come and watch me, they're coming to watch me to get an escape. That's what stand-up comedy is. It's an escape. When you're in theater, it's an escape from your, just like when you go to a cinema and you watch a movie, it's an escape from your reality. So I want people to hear my story and what I thought of South Africa and how I fell in love with it. I talk about being mugged. I talk about experiencing a rugby game. I talk about experiencing biltong. I talk about experiencing a Gatsby. I talk about so many things, and about I do a play on the gang Americans, because I'm American. So like I have this whole shtick about me being confused about that, and I try and embrace it. I show that I'm trying to embrace the culture and not shy away from it.
Oh my goodness. Because I think the thing is because America amongst in Cape Town is very much like the cool country. You've got the obsession with American tacky, sorry, sneakers, and just the obsession with anything American is like that's the good shit. You know, everyone grew up on American hip hop. You've got like the
Yes.
big genre of music in Cape Town is hip hop. They look to the Americans for examples. They look to Americans for style sort of indicators. And in some ways, they actually get ahead of the curve. A former classmate of mine, he got internationally renowned for doing a little like short video, a short documentary on the sneaker culture, the tacky culture in the Cape, on the Cape Flats. And they actually started trends that moved into America on their
Oh.
own. And do you think that being Americans helped you down here in the Cape more than it would say in other parts of the country?
I don't know. Maybe. I do think being foreign and well, that's the thing. I'm not really foreign. I mean, I am South African, and I've been here for a very large part of my life. Um, I would like to think, and I think, okay, let me answer it like this. Do I think being American has helped me in my comedy career in South Africa? Is that the question? I just want to understand the question.
Yeah, or has
Yeah,
it hindered you, if
hindered
that's
me.
the answer?
I think in some aspects it's hindered me. In some aspects, it's definitely made it interesting and fun. I think that I have a different perspective to the South African culture than most people would have. Yes, some of the jokes have been told before in terms of like, for example, I was always told by fellow comedians, yeah, maybe you shouldn't do the robot joke anymore because every time a foreigner comes here, they also do a robot joke. But my robot joke is different to what they would come up with. It's I have a
Hmm.
story. I'm a storytelling comedian, so it's not just a
Oh, I see.
one-liner joke about robots. It's a story how I experienced it when I heard there was robots here, and then I go into this whole shtick about I was waiting for Optimus Prime to pop out, and I do sound effects, and I do all this other stuff. So I
Yes.
elaborate a lot more on that. And whereas I've seen other comedians who come here from all over the world, where they just have a one line kind of thing about the robots. It's not they don't elaborate on it. Same with comic books. Same with all the other stuff. And so yeah, I think in that regard, it's helped me a lot. Where it hinders me is the fact that I'm still learning the South African culture. I'm still learning a lot about
Yeah.
different ethnic groups and stuff like that, which as I learn, I'll come up with more jokes about it and how I see it.
Yeah. So how does that? So you have you have a little bit of a balance between improvising and interaction and some little sort of formulas that you can rest on throughout the evening. How does that how do you balance that out? And do you how do you feel that the context you're in is do you feel that the context you're in limits you? Because there are obviously South Africa is a land with a lot of sensitivities, a lot of landmines, lots of things to look out for. People can be a bit. I wouldn't even like to call us sensitive. We're not sensitive in the way that someone in the UK would be sensitive, where they will say, "Oh, that's inappropriate." We might get quite angry. So, how do you cope with those landmines?
Well, I'll be honest. I do think that some audiences here in South Africa are very sensitive. I've been told by some people that a joke I used to do was considered racist. I didn't see that. I didn't intend for it to come out that way. And I have since scrapped the joke because obviously I don't want to offend people. But it is a difficult balance to find that equilibrium where you're not being insulting and where you're not overstepping a line where you make the audience feel cringe. It is a very, however, because I play on the whole fish out of water, I'm experiencing this as a foreigner, but I love this place. I can get away with some stuff. I can push the envelope. And I try and do that. I try and push the
Okay.
envelope as far as I can within that limitation as much as possible because that's what stand-up comedy is also about. It's about pushing that envelope. I think, what's his name? Um, Jim Jeffries, in his last one-man show, said it beautifully.
Ah, yes.
Where there is a line. In the 90s, there was a line, right? And he went up till that line. He pushed that line, okay? But now in the year 2020, 2020, that line has come back. But now people want to get mad at him because the line was somewhere else in the 90s. It doesn't work that way. He's now going up to the line in 2020. That's in 2020. That's the line he goes up to, and that's what a comedian should do.
Mm.
They should always go up to the line, in whatever context that is in society, and push that line. Yes, make people think. Yes, but don't go over the line to the point where you're being insulting, demeaning, and almost inciting maybe hate speech or violence or basically abusing your privilege as a comedian. And I mean privilege, it is a
Yeah.
privilege to be a comedian and to do what we do. I don't mean that in the sense of white privilege. I mean that in the sense of to be able to go on a stage and talk to people
Mm.
who have paid money to come see you, good, hard earned money. That is something that demands respect. It's not about the comedians and it's not about me. It's about entertaining the people that have come to watch me. And the moment you
Yeah.
disrespect them, you're not a comedian, in my opinion. That doesn't make you a comedian. Now, there's a fine line.
Mm.
There's a lot of comedians like Dennis Leary, what we call angry comedians, who do push that line, and man, they push that line very far, like Jim Jeffries and all these guys. But they're always punching up. They're always analyzing and saying, hey, let's think for a moment about this. And that's what I also try and do in my comedy, where I am a bit of slapstick and adventurous in storytelling. I'm still making the audience think for a moment, like, huh, that is kind of funny of something that South Africans do.
Yeah.
That is funny. I can see how that would be funny to the outside world.
Yeah. It's like, well, you're there to give people a good time, right?
Yeah.
Like, why would you not want? Why would you do something that wouldn't give people a good time? I think, but I think so. There's an interesting thing because we always talk about how sensitive South Africans are, but I think of someone like, and I mentioned this on another talk I had with a fellow friend of mine who's in advertising, is Nando's. They always find a way of making fun of almost everyone, but in a way that always manages to maintain a sort of affectionate nature. And it's such a delicate balance to maintain, to be affectionately mocking of somebody, because we've all got silly nonsense in and foibles that everyone recognizes between groups and in individuals as well, of course.
Mm.
Um,
I say, we're allowed to push the line, but here's the other flip side of the coin. With
mm,
Nando's, for example. Nando's, I think, is a company that is not afraid to be a bit controversial, for lack of a better word.
mm,
Um, and there are people that find the funny in that, and there are people that find it offensive. And I think that's true no matter what comedian you are, no matter what joke you tell. Someone might find it offensive. It's very difficult to remain non-offensive. There's jokes that I've said, like I just said earlier, that people found offensive. But in my mind, for me as an artist, I don't think it's offensive. There is a limit, obviously. Like if I'm going out there saying, certain people are evil and stuff like that, that's different. But there are some
mm.
jokes that are being told in general by many different comedians that some people will find offensive and some people won't, and that's the beauty of stand-up comedy and comedy. Comedy is very subjective, and
Oh yeah.
what what might be funny to me won't be funny to you. Everybody has a different sense of humor. I'm seeing it in the chats now. People talking about dark humor being awesome, and I know people that hate dark humor. I know people that don't like Jim Jeffries or Jimmy Carr, but I know people that love Jeff Dunham and Barry Hilton. Comedy and Mark Watering. Comedy is very, very subjective. It's John Lithmus, who unfortunately has retired. He was one of these controversial comedians, and people loved him, but there were also people that hated him. He was very, very, very split. But again, that's the beauty of comedy. I don't think John was ever punching down. I think he spoke a lot of. He was able to take what a lot of comedians strive to do, which is take a truth and flip it, and make you think. And like, oh man, that's a bit risque, but it's still funny. He has a joke about his domestic worker, how, and this is his joke before people freak out, um, where he was talking about how his parents used to say like, "Oh, blacks are evil, blacks are this, blacks are that," but then they'd leave him for 8 hours with one, and he'd be like, "Oh my word, what are you doing?" It's a truth that is. He says it much funnier than I do, but it's a truth that made South Africans think. And I've spoken to a lot of people about John Blismus, and that's one of their favorite jokes. Anybody who likes him thinks that's a very funny joke, because it shows the hypocrisy in our society sometimes. And those jokes to me are something that's pure comedy gold. Not because of the race element or anything like that, because he's not talking necessarily about race. He's talking about a
Because it's
situation.
human.
Yes, it's human, exactly. He's talking about a situation that was real. And he's taking a situation and being like, this is how we were, this is how we acted, how does this make sense? Why are we even um, why is this even a discussion? This is like, it's in the past, let's let it go. That was the message in the joke. And yeah, some people take that to heart and they say, oh, but that's so racist, and how could he say that, and blah blah blah. And again, comedy is subjective. And I think it's nearly impossible for any comedian to not be offensive to someone, because someone is going to feel sensitive about it. And this is going back to your question about sensitive audiences. Um, I think in general, audiences can be sensitive to certain things. Obviously, there are certain topics that comedians just tend to not talk about, like, for example, rape. We tend not to talk about that. There's very little thing that we can find funny about that. But there are other topics that we can find a way to push the envelope. And some people, when we push the envelope, when we push that line, it can become offensive to some. But at the same time, again, what might be funny to you may not be funny to me. And it's always the audience that's going to decide who makes or what makes a comedian.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think about a lot, the thing that always impressed me when I first discovered it was there's a wave of comedians that sort of more recently, the last couple of decades, they produce these big, long sort of like these long specials, 45 minutes to an hour, whatever it is, and the whole show will have some kind of interlocking logic to it, where all the pieces work together like this sort of big, cohesive. I mean, Dylan Moran
Yeah.
is big for that one. Louis C.K. And I sort of think, well, that's got to be an awful lot of work.
Yeah.
How many comedians do you think, as a percentage, it can't be that many who do these sort of big, elaborate, almost said vertonings, these big, elaborate shows like that.
No, there aren't many. If you look at Robin Williams, who's one of the greatest comedians I think to ever live, he didn't really have a theme or a big outstanding message, and that's usually like some of the best comedians do that. Ellen DeGeneres in her recent One Woman show also did that. I think she's done in most of her shows. She's done one about procrastinating, which was brilliant. And the recent one, it was about being relative. I try and do it. It's very difficult to have a theme. And at the moment, in my one-man show, my theme is, am I South African now? Basically, that's the start, or that's the theme starts for me when I wrote that show. That was the starting point. Am I South African now? That's the overall question. I'm asking myself, have I experienced enough about South Africa to be able to call myself South African? And that is the underlying message. That's what ties everything together. That's what helps the story move forward, because I'm experiencing all these different things. And at the end, I ask the audience, like, am I South African now? And I let them decide. But yeah, it's very, very difficult to get that right, especially when you ask a question, or you maybe have a topic. Like Louis C.K. is always like a topic. Ellen DeGeneres is always a topic. Like procrastination. To find jokes that relate to that, and to also make it relatable to the people, and make this big grandiose show, and go out of the theme, then come back into the theme, and then round it all up nicely, so where it's one big callback to the beginning. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And I think it's something that takes years of experience to get right. I'm definitely one that aspires to be that good.
Yeah, well, I look forward to your first major special when you do put it out.
Thank you.
One of the questions I'd be interesting to ask is, so here in the Netherlands, because I now speak Dutch, I've got to appreciate the Dutch have a really just underrated comedy scene. They have some of the most amazing comics, but they do it all in Dutch, which no one gives a goddamn about. No one learns Dutch. So, but I was thinking, so you, I assume, speak a fair amount of Arabic because you lived in Egypt for some time. What's the Arabic comedy scene like? Do they have a different approach to what's the deal with the Arabic comedy scene compared to the English speaking world?
Unfortunately, I am not going to have a very interesting answer to that, because I was very young when I was in Egypt. I hadn't started my comedy career then. I did take an interest in stand-up, but I was so young that I wouldn't have known about if there was any Egyptian circuits of comedy or anything like that. I didn't venture into comedy that way. For me, at the time in Egypt, I remember I thought it was only in America that stand-up comedy happened. And So yeah, I wouldn't know. Do I know of any now? No, I haven't heard any of my friends talk about a scene, but there probably is. I'm sure there is. I've met an Iranian comedian on the circuit here. He was coming and visiting, and he said that there are comedy scenes in Iran. So I would imagine that there are comedy scenes in Egypt. I don't know about them, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I think I always think there's a lot that because we are so dominated by the American scene, and in some ways that's a good thing because the I look back at some of the traditions of stage comedy in England, and it just makes me cringe. So in some ways, I'm glad that the Americans took the baton up, but I think a lot of the sort of like little tricks that the cabaret the cabaret style, which is sort of much more sort of western part of the European continent. There's so much more you can do with it. I mean, like Mark Lottering's big with that sort of stuff, where you incorporate a bit of music. You can play around with props on stage. You can play around with costumes and so on. But it never becomes. They never let it become an intrusive sort of sketch
Yes.
theme thing. It's always light. It's always easy. And I don't know. I mean, what do you make of that sort of scene? Does it ever influence how you think about jokes or think about setting things up on stage?
So you
Sort of
mean like
behavior and blocking.
including skits in my stand up, and including costumes and
Yeah, I
stuff like
mean,
that, characters and stuff.
yeah. How does that how does it influence how you think mostly think about the stage?
Okay, well, in my opinion, I think that's an artistic decision to make. There's nothing wrong
Yes.
with what Mark Lotring does. Obviously, it's funny. He's done a lot of musicals that are funny. I know Casper de Vries also did costumes and characters and stuff like that. I think if you're a comedian who enjoys doing that, then by all means do it. I'm not.
Mm.
I want to work more on impersonations.
Oh
I
yeah.
like impersonations. I love comedians who impersonate. That's why I love Robin Williams because of his voice talent. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I also enjoy like pure stand up, man. Like look at Dave Chappelle. He never was a character on
Oh
stage. Yeah, he
yeah.
had like his skit
Mm.
show and stuff, but that was different. That was on
Mm.
TV. That was meant for TV, you know. But when he did stand up, even till today, it's pure stand up comedy. You go on stage and you talk to the audience and you make them laugh. That's the stand up comedy I enjoy.
Oh yeah.
I don't think I would ever incorporate skits or anything like that in my one man shows.
Mm.
And again, nothing wrong with
No.
it. It's not to say that's incorrect or you
Yeah.
shouldn't do that. No, by all means, if that's your artistic direction, you want to include skits, you want to include costumes, and you feel like that's your voice, your style. By all means, do it. It makes you more unique. I just
Mm.
enjoy the pure. Maybe I'm a purist in that regard. But then again, you know, stand up comedy was born in the like you mentioned the cabaret days, where there was it was usually the MC who was the comedian, and then there was different acts on during the show. So yeah, it's not to say that you can't do it,
Mm.
and it's not to say that it's frowned upon or anything like that. I just think yeah, it's an artistic decision.
Mm. I mean, but yeah, no, Dave Chappelle, no, he's the real master, though. I mean, where things are right now, he's really the top-notch fella. At this point, I mean, like at this point, he really brags about it in his shows a lot,
Yeah,
and he's made it. He's gotten to that point where he's become so fluent on stage that he can just sort of seamlessly transition between the serious and the humorous with flawless pathos and flawless gravitas. And I can't think of anyone on stage who's been so easy with that.
yeah,
What I mean, I know your big sort of early hero was Dane Cook. I notice he's a very very high energy guy
yeah.
on stage. Which of these? How do you sort of learn from comedians? Which are the big things that you tend to pick out? Because um, I don't know, as a passive viewer, you don't think about sort of the craft so much. You just sort of accept, well, does it make me laugh now? Does it make me feel something?
Yes.
How much do you scrutinize these things? Do you sit there? I mean, I remember an interview with Louis C.K. and he was talking about George Carlin, and at the eulogy he gave at his funeral, and it was the whole thing of sitting in his car when like everything's not working for his career, and hearing George Carlin saying, "Oh, this is my secret. This is how I do things."
Yeah.
How do you learn from other comedians? Because it's not like music where you just imitate the thing until you pick up notes.
Mm.
Unless that is how it works, I wouldn't know.
Okay, so with stand up, it is something that, I mean, stage time is your best friend. So the more stage time you get, the better you're going to be at it. Much like practicing a guitar or whatever. That's your practice,
Mm.
is getting stage time, going to open mic nights, and owning your craft. But in terms of watching other comedians like Dave Chappelle and all these other guys, like I was honored and lucky enough to get tickets to Dave Chappelle when he came to Cape Town, which for me and a lot of other comedians was an amazing experience, because again, this is he's the reason why I'm a comedian. Like if it wasn't, I wouldn't say if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have been a comedian. But he was the first comedian I ever listened to, so for me it was a big deal. And watching him live was so different to watching him on TV. And when we watch each other live, it is different. I do watch a comedian to listen to his bit and enjoy it. But you must understand that when you're on the circuit a lot, you start to learn each other's jokes. Start to know, okay, cool. So he's doing this bit, which means he's going to go into that bit, which means he's going to go into this bit, and he'll end off on that bit. We literally know each other's like kind of repertoire. We get very excited when we notice something different, or a comedian has changed his punchline, or a comedian has a new joke. Then we're like, okay, something new. This is cool. All right, it's a new show. And we get very excited about that. But what we learn from the greats, like the Martin Lothring or Barry Hilton, when we see them live, is how they control the stage, how they deliver their material, how they've set it up, where's the punchline, their energy that they have on the stage. Are they looking up or are they looking down? Where all these little small things that when you watch them live, you're not just listening to them. And sometimes when you watch a great comedian, it is difficult to not get lost in their story, because obviously you're watching them now as an audience member, not really trying to analyze them. But sometimes you do find yourself as a comedian analyzing them more than just listening to them. Like, for example, when I was listening or watching Dave Chappelle, I was like, geez, look at how he like walks around. Look at how he's so relaxed. Look at how he says this with confidence. Look at how he like says this and that. Wow, this guy's sweating a lot. Like, and how the hell does he remember this? And if he forgets something, how does he bring it back? All these little techniques that you pick up when you watch them live. And if you watch them enough times, you'll start being able to implement these little tricks into your own stand-up comedy. And if you're lucky, if you're very lucky, you get to meet them. I've met Barry Hilton. I had him on the show. I've met Mark Lottering. I unfortunately didn't get the chance to meet Dave. He's very secretive. But when you meet them, these guys, I mean, Barry Hilton is very open to give advice to young comedians, which I think is amazing. If you watch my show, he gave advice to a lot of comedians that were in the chats and asking questions. And even the first time I met him, he told me, like, write a joke once a day. Like one joke, every day, one joke. Just one joke. You'll have a one-man show, a new one-man show by the end of the year. And I thought that was like, it's such a simple thing. It really is a simple thing. But it's like, why the flip did I not think of that? Like, instead of sitting for 2-3 hours at my desk and like forcing jokes and a whole new bit, I could just write one joke for a week and I have a new 5-minute set. I write one joke for 2 weeks, I have a new 10-minute set. And it was something that, I mean, I still should implement it. But it's advice nonetheless that I think a lot of comedians could use, and it just goes to show that fellow comedians are not shy to give each other advice and learn from each other.
Yeah, it's funny. That reminds me of a joke. So, I mean, you know the one where you've got the young bull and the old bull on the top of the hill, and the young bull says to him, "Well, let's run down there and shag as many cows as we can before we have to fuck off." And then the old bull says, "Hang on a second, wait, easy now. We're gonna walk down there, and we're gonna fuck every single one of them."
Yeah, you
So
have a
yeah,
very
slow and
interesting
steady.
sense of
I
humor.
really like that approach.
All right, so we've gone over the hour. So I just very quickly I do want to address some of the questions that have been coming in. Sorry, guys, I've been so into the conversation, I've neglected a bit the chats. But Germ Warfare was here. Thank you so much for tuning in, buddy. He was confused. He saw you interviewing me. Um, yes, Rob was interviewing me. I was a guest on my own show for a change, which was amazing. Someone asked, I did see a glimpse of it. Some people were asking me to say a joke. Let me just address that. Guys, there is a playlist on my YouTube channel of my stand-up comedy. Please go find it and check it out. Trust me, it'll be way more effective if you watch my stand-up like that than me just telling a joke here. But I kind of did say a few jokes during this interview. And then there was someone who asked about heckling. Oh, that's a big thing for us. I don't like hecklers. I hate hecklers, but I have a way of dealing with them. So I'll let them have their say a few times. Then I'll retaliate. I'll be honest, I'm not very good at shutting down hecklers. I know a lot of people love it, like with Jimmy Carr. He's like got a natural way of doing that, but that comes with years of experience. I'm not there yet.
Oh my goodness.
So
It's
yeah,
it's funny. Do you ever learn where the term heckling?
I used to know. It's escaped me now.
It's an old term. It's for the way that the people who were sheep farmers who prepared the wool. Heckling is you're teasing all of the burrs and bits of soil out of the wool. And so it comes from the old British tradition of interrupting a sort of parliamentarian or politician who's come down to talk to the people. And you're teasing out the truth from him. You're improving him with criticism.
I didn't know that. That's cool. Let's see here. Someone's asking a question about you. Is it possible to find out if Rob is going to do some videos on history of other aspects of SA history, i.e., Mafeking, etc.?
Well, I don't know. Depends. I'll probably do like a couple of little videos. I've got this big, fat, ugly thing that I'm doing at the moment, which is revolutionary ideology. It's kind of the history of Western revolutionary ideas as they pertain to South Africa, which it's 250 years compressed into under 40 minutes. But that's still a really long video, and so the script took ages to polish up, and then I'm not a workhorse with these editing things like Joe is. It doesn't come to me naturally. So yeah, I'm much more comfortable with writing. I mean, I've done like several like long form essays on my blog in the time that I could have been spending doing the video. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, you do have a video coming up, so that's cool. So people can look forward to that. And I did leave a link to Rob's YouTube channel in the description below. So please go show him some love and give him a subscribe. I have here a question from Chico. Um, Jeremy, what about Mitch Hedberg? He has zero stage presence, but he was absolutely amazing. Yeah, well, I love Mitch Hedberg. I've always enjoyed Mitch Hedberg. One of the best one-liner comedians of all time, in my opinion. But also,
Yeah, like
I think that's what the way
Stephen
he
Wright.
was added to his presence or stage presence. He always had stage presence.
Mm.
He being a certain way on stage. I don't. Maybe he was like that all the time with people. That uh, kind
Dopey.
of yeah, dopey. Maybe he was, but I do think he was shy. I do think he was withdrawn a bit. Um, and it's a matter of fact, I do remember reading that the reason why he wore sunglasses on the stage is because he was shy.
Mm.
And because of the spotlight, but mainly because he felt shy, and the sunglasses kind of helped make him feel like he was in his room doing the bits. So I think when someone or a comedian has, it's weird because you watch Mitch Hedberg and the way he is, the way he stands, it just draws you in, and that's stage presence. So yeah,
Mm.
he may not have been lively as Dane Cook, but he demanded the stage just as much as any other comedian. So yeah.
And it's making me think of Stephen Wright, another one of those one-liners.
Yes.
He also said that he is very sort of shy and couldn't deal with interactions with the crowd, and so a lot of the sort of shtick, apparent what looked like a shtick that he had on stage, was mostly him trying not to look at the crowd and trying to remember his lines.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, let's close it here. I see a lot of people are exiting. So thanks, Rob. Thank you so much for interviewing me, man. You had some great questions. It was an honor to be interviewed by you, man. Thank you so much. I just also want to let you know that Shack Dweller is here, and he's letting you
Haha.
know that he's a big fanboy. As always, a good show. I'm off. Beautiful people, be safe. So he's a big fanboy. And yeah, is there anything you want to say, Rob, before we end off?
Oh no, I've said enough. Um, no, I'm just glad we've got you on our little alternative media circuit, spicing things up. It's good to have someone who's got a serious work ethic instead of me who's procrastinating all the time.
Dude, I'm a comedian. I go on stage for a living. I can't go on stage right now. So what do you expect?
No, man, but it's good. It's good having you in this little online community.
Thanks, man. It's great to be
And
part of it.
yeah, yeah.
Go ahead. What were you going to say?
No. I just a normal verbal tick where I go and yeah to agree with someone, and then because of the internet delay, it just messes everything up.
No worries. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this was Sit Down and Lockdown with guest host Rob Duigan. Please, once again, go and subscribe to him. His link for his channel is in the description. Amazing documentary vibe videos about South Africa. I highly recommend. An amazing narrative voice, by the way. Like you should seriously think about selling yourself as a voiceover artist. Like I'm not even joking. I think you've got a great narrative voice.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so ladies and gentlemen, this was Sit Down Lockdown with guest host Rob Dugan, and I was guest Joe Emilio. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like, and please consider subscribing to my channel. I've got more content coming your way. Tomorrow night I will be back. I will be doing the morning shot wind down. I'm taking over Morning Shot's spot, whether he likes it or not. So please come join me for that. We'll look at the news and we'll discuss some things. But other than that, ladies and gentlemen, if I don't see you then, please stay safe, be kind to one another, and I'll see you at the next one. Cheers. Hey guys, so if you enjoyed the show, please consider giving it a like and a share. Don't forget to subscribe as well if you're new to my channel. And if you really enjoyed the content, feel free to join and become a member. Don't forget about my fight against cancel culture. That's in the link in the description below. Support my fight against cancel culture. Go to that link and all the information is there. Other than that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching.